almost weekly from about April to October, November, and they discussed anything that had to do with pollinator health. And some of the things that they looked at and considered were what pesticide regulations are out there in general that would protect pollinators. They looked at what was currently in Oregon, what other states had, what other countries had. They looked at the research that was out there for pollinator health, and specifically what research has been done on pesticide use and neonicotinoids and how it affects bees. They looked at applicator licensing and education. They looked at how other states gathered data on bees to find out if they were healthy or not. And they looked at best management practices and what may work for neonicotinoids. And then they also looked at all of these things, how, if and what any of this stuff is wanted, how it would be funded. That's a whole separate conversation. So this was a large task force. ODA was there. We were not part of the committee. We were there. People had questions relating to our role in some of these things, and they also brought in other people from OSU to make presentations on toxicological data. They talked to people in different states, such as Minnesota, who were bee experts or who were instituting plans within their state to see how they were going. So it was a very interesting process. But what the governor wanted was, okay, you go through all of this, and then you give me a report, and you tell me what your consensus is on your recommendations on what we should do to protect pollinator health. So the committee did that, and the final document is available here. It's actually not too hefty a document. I'd say it's about between 20 and 30 pages. And it's pretty easy reading because it's a lot of bullets. Kind of explains how this started and who the committee members were and what their tasks were. And then it goes through what the consensus was for the group on some of this information. So some of the recommendations that they made to the governor, or the then governor, is this, and this is what could affect you. Now, these are recommendations. This is not something that is currently, well, some of it's not currently there. It's something that could potentially be brought forward in this legislative session, so it's something that could impact you in the future. So one of the things that came up, and I always put this first, is the reinstatement of PERS. Now, how many people in here remember PERS? Yeah, see, yeah, well, a few people. And generally speaking, it's not remembered terribly fondly. This is the pesticide use reporting system. You're laughing because you're like, that's, yeah. The pesticide use reporting system was, or is, a program that was instituted by the state. It made mandatory that all pesticide applications be reported to the state of Oregon, specifically to the Department of Health. Supposedly all pesticide applications, not just farm, anything. It was rather a large program, kind of unwieldy, took a lot of time and a lot of money. And it's still on the books as a valid program, but it's been what's called sunsetted. There is no money to fund it, and it's kind of there in the background, and most people are hoping it will never rear its head again. Well, the Pollinator Task Force was a consensus that maybe this should be reinstated. So you know, there's no way to know at this point in time whether it will be. It may be brought forward by somebody in the legislature.
Did they give any rationale as why?
So the question was, what was the rationale for reinstating PERS? Because they want to know what pesticide applications everybody's doing, I think. I mean, I missed this part of it. I didn't go to all the meetings other people in my office did. They were very concerned about what pesticide applications are going on, and if it's a licensed applicator making them, or a homeowner, or who's making it. And I think it's a control. They want to have some control and know what's going on there.
Well, I believe the control part.
One of the things that came up through the task force meetings a lot was, okay, all of this information is great from licensed applicators because we know where you are, you're licensed with us. We can send you information, we can get information from you fairly easily. But there's a whole raft of people out there that are not licensed. All those homeowners using pesticides we don't know anything about. So I think there was a lot of concern that some of these neonicotinoid pesticides in particular are being used by homeowners because they're general use products. They want to know how they're being used. And there's no way for us to monitor that. But with PERS, supposedly there is. In the old system, in order to find out what homeowners were using, they would call randomly homeowners in different counties. Tell us about what pesticides you use. And then they'd have to explain, okay, here's what a pesticide is. This product, this product, this product, this product. Yes, Roundup is a pesticide, bleach is a pesticide. And they'd have to go through all this, and they'd have to tease out information like this. Well, it wasn't always easy, because people weren't willing to talk to the government about this. I don't know if it's going to come back. I don't know if it'll come back in the same way if it does come back, but it's something to monitor.
Have they ever talked to about the idea of having Home Depot and Lowe's and Fred Meyer just tell them what they sold? It's in an area, we sold X amount of this product in this area. That's all they really need to know. It's watershed and everything else almost.
I know. So, yeah, I don't know if you guys all heard this, that the legislature it should be monitoring at the large box stores in particular, what the box stores are selling. And maybe who they're selling it to. Well, that's a whole other issue. And we had all this conversation about box stores. They're like, well, the box stores, you have people in the box stores selling product. And we're like, yes. And they're like, well, those people buying product, they're going to the box store people to ask them what they should buy. How many people in box stores are licensed? Or no? I mean, they ship those people around a lot. It's dealing with the large box stores and hardware stores and others that it's very difficult to get this information. That was a huge conversation. But anyway, I wanted to make you aware about PERS. So, as a potential. Not that it's necessarily going to happen, but it's definitely been brought up in the task force. The other thing, this is much more likely to happen, is the development of best management practices by applicators, by others to protect pollinator health, the best way to do that. Now, how that's going to be done, I don't know. It may happen at a state level, like there's a state BMP plan. It could be different commissions deciding that they want to have best management practices and kind of institute those. But the task force recommends that we have best management practices in place. And that the state develop a pollinator plan. That also came out through Obama's information on pollinator health, that he wanted each state to have a state pollinator plan. So that will happen. Probably before the end of the year there will be one. Most states are working on that. They can get will probably be kind of large and unruly, and each state is probably going to write them differently. But there's something that is going to happen. This impacts you all. Well, anybody in here who's a licensed applicator. The task force recommended that applicator training be increased. And not just necessarily increased, but specified. So now, okay, so as a private applicator, you have to get 16 credit hours in 5 years, right? Or in core. As a commercial or a public applicator, you need to get 40 credit hours in 5 years. And the classes are not specified for commercial and public applicators. It's like you need to get 40 hours. The state, the task force is recommending that maybe we change our system to say, okay, you get 40 credit hours over 5 years. We want you to have at least 2 or 3 credit hours each year, specifically on pollinator protection, or understanding bees, or anything that has to do with pollinators. So making it very specific. Could come down the pike. It's something that they're very interested in. And this is going to take place. The task force recommended that certain neonicotinoids be prohibited for use on lindens. That will be a permanent rule in probably less than a month. The other thing that the task force recommended was that overall pollinator health outreach and education be increased at all sectors, both by licensed applicators, for others through OSU and OSU Extension, anybody that could give information on pollinator health, that should be increased. Are there any questions about what happened at the task force? And so, if you want to read the task force, it's available there. If you don't have something to write it down with, I can get you the information. Yeah, Amy?
I think you might have mentioned it, but how do they plan on funding some of this?
So Amy asked, how are they planning on funding this? Yeah, well, this could impact some of you too. Boy, they came up with all sorts of potential ways to raise funds for research and pesticide applicator training and PER system. And I can tell you a few of the recommendations that they made. One, increase product registration fees. So if a company has a product that they want to sell and distribute in the state of Oregon, on a yearly basis, they get charged $160 to register the product in the state of Oregon. And of course, the task force looked at that and said, wow, we are really reasonable when it comes to product registration fees. California is like $600 a product or $700. Other states are all over the place. We're really low. We should increase those fees because then we could take that money and use it towards pollinator protection. So that was one way. Another way that they talked about increasing fees was charge more for pesticide applicator licenses. Okay, so as a private is $25 every 5 years, which is really reasonable. Increase that. Commercial applicators and operator have a set fee, increase that, that's another way. They had some really interesting ways of coming up with funding mechanisms. One was talking about there's money, I guess, in each state that comes from, I don't know, money that's not money from taxes that people don't get back. They don't get, like the checks come back and they just kind of sit there, using something similar to that. There are all sorts of ways that they talked about funding. But yes, nothing, I would say nothing set in stone except increase product registration fees. They were all for that. And so there's a high likelihood that will be increased. Whether all the increase in money goes towards pollinator protection is also dependent on our statutes and what's going on. Okay, so this is the other big topic that I have to talk to you about. Ooh, and it took me 20 minutes to talk about bees, which is good because you're probably going to find this a lot more boring. But I'm going to talk about buffers and where we are in the whole buffer zone situation regarding endangered salmon species. And you're going to like that this is shorter because usually this is how people feel after I do this talk. They'll either feel like a little rat in the maze going round and round and round, or the little hamster in the wheel going round and round and round. But I just want to go through quickly some of the history of this entire situation so that you have a better idea of where we've been and maybe where we're going now. The whole lawsuit regarding endangered salmon in Oregon, Washington, California started in 2001, so it's been going on almost 15 years now. And it started when Washington Toxic Coalition sued in federal court US EPA, stating that they were registering pesticide products that had not been adequately there wasn't adequate consultation with the National Marine Fisheries Service on how the use of those pesticide products could affect endangered salmon species. That's what it boiled down to. And the court agreed and said, yes, it's true. EPA did not consult with NIMS to find out how these pesticide products could affect salmon. So that occurred in 2002, that the court agreed with Washington Toxic Coalition and said that EPA had not followed the rules and obligations set forth under the Endangered Species Act, specifically with Pacific salmon. And the court ordered EPA to consult with NIMS on 54 pesticide products that were commonly used at the time. As a kind of part of that lawsuit, the court also said, while EPA and NIMS were looking at these 54 pesticide products, the court was going to mandate a no-spray buffer zone around salmon-bearing streams and as a protective measure. And this is a court-ordered mandate for these 54 pesticides, and it stated that any of these pesticides would need a 60-foot ground application buffer around salmon-bearing streams or a 300-foot buffer for area applications. And those buffers were to remain in effect by the court until the final consultation between EPA and National Marine Fisheries Service, NIMS, had completed on the products, and a biological opinion, or what we call BIOP, was released, was finalized. Now, the court-ordered buffers from 2002, 2004 were court mandated. They were not on pesticide labels. And the only authority that you have on court-ordered mandates is the federal marshal. So if somebody is not following these buffer zone requirements, if they come to us as ODA Enforcement Division and say, this person is not following the buffer zone, we can't do anything about it. We have to contact EPA, they contact the court decides whether they want to send out a federal marshal to come knocking on your door. Okay? I don't know that that has ever happened in Oregon, Washington, or California. It may have. It's not happened in Oregon, to the best of my knowledge. But none of us, California DPR, WSDA, ODA, none of us have the authority to enforce these buffers. Now, do we urge you to follow the buffers? Absolutely. Can we enforce that? No. Okay, so now we are at, I don't know, somewhere in 2004 or 5. And we have these 54 pesticides that the court said, you guys have to consult on and tell me how they affect salmon. Well, that was all well and good, except there was some breakdown in the system. I don't know what happened. And NIMS did not consult with EPA. And there was another lawsuit filed, this time against NIMS, saying you're not doing your job. This is in 2007 or so, and the court said, yeah, that's true, NIMS, you're not doing what you're supposed to. We're going to slap your hand and tell you to do it. And they said that of those 54 pesticides that were on the initial court mandate, it's now 37 pesticides. The court was going to put EPA and NIMS on a court-ordered schedule. They're going to say, you're going to do it, we have to do it by these pesticides by this time, these pesticides by that time, a very strict schedule. And that happened, actually. And of the 37 pesticides that were supposed to be looked at on schedule, the first 3 pesticides were very common organophosphates. It was specifically chlorpyrifos, diazinon, and malathion. And the biological opinion was released in 2008, and NIMS said that their research showed that in order for salmon to be safe around salmon-bearing streams in the western states, there would need to be a 500-foot buffer for ground applications for these products and a 1,000-foot for aerial applications. In 2009, they came out with their next biological opinion, and it was on 3 carbamates, carbaryl, carbofuran, and methomyl. And they said essentially the same thing. Yes, these do harm salmon. These are the buffer zones that we think, well, that we are stating that you should put on pesticide labels. So those were the final biological opinions. So that meant that the court ordered buffer zones of 60 feet, 300 feet went away in 2008 and 2009 on these products. And the buffers reverted to what were on the labels, because it was anticipated that EPA would look at these products and look at the biological opinion and talk to the registrants about changing the pesticide labels to follow these buffers. That did not happen. EPA said, we like your science. We don't think this is right. This is not good. So they said, we're not going to institute those buffer zones on those products. We are going to propose this new system, which is called Bulletin Slide. Now, some of you, the same people who probably knew about PERS, probably knew about Bulletin Slide, right? It never worked. It was this website, you put your information in there, and nothing would spit out. So it was kind of a failed website. So here's the thing. So, it's like, okay, now we're in suit number 3 because EPA didn't institute the buffers. They got sued. So we kind of ran around again. And they were sued specifically over the fact that they didn't institute the buffers for these products. So that was in 2010 or so. So where are we now? So we've now had at least 3 lawsuits, right? We've got multiple biological opinions. We have buffer zones, court mandated, not court mandated. So here's where we sit now, because in August of this last year, the court finally ruled on the lawsuit that related to those organophosphates and those carbamic products, the chlorpyrifos, malathion, diazinon, carbaryl, and they said, okay, back to the drawing board, new biological opinion, and oh, by the way, we're going to institute the court-ordered buffer on these products. So now we have, on these products, we have a new biological opinion pending, back to the drawing board. We have the court-mandated buffers, which are only enforceable by the court and a federal marshal. Now, there was still pending biological opinions on about 7 products still from lawsuit number 2 that still had these buffer zones on them, and these are the products that were pending. Okay, so they had the same buffers as these, just from a different lawsuit. In January 20th, so a couple weeks ago, a final biological opinion was released for these products. So these no longer have a court-ordered buffer. They go back to the buffers that are on the label. I have not read the biological opinion on it. I was told that the recommendations for the buffers on these products are on page 566. I'm kind of afraid to download the biological opinion because I don't know how long that's going to take. But they were quite large buffers. They were like 50 to 500 feet. So just to reiterate, we have buffer zones in place on the products of 60 feet and 300 feet on these products and these products. And even if you don't use these pesticide products, the ones that are under the court-mandated buffers, the last time that the judge looked at those 5 products, the chlorpyrifos, he said, wait a second, we're only looking at endangered salmon on the West Coast. We've got 2,000 other listed species in the U.S. I think we should be looking at those too. So now, EPA is going to have to start looking at all 2,000 listed species in the U.S. So this is how it affects you. Even if you don't use those products and you're not in your salmon-bearing streams, sooner or later, you may have to watch out for other listed species. On some of the new biological opinions, there are no updated buffer zone information. It's just what's on the label, but the labels could be changing fairly soon. And I'll see if I can go through this pretty quickly because my time is just about up. But EPA has instituted a website called Salmon Mapper. This one actually works. It really does. And this is for the products that have a court-mandated buffer. You can put the product in that you're going to use. Select what state. You hit submit. And it leads you to county maps. And if you actually have a specific area, it will zoom in quite closely. And in red are the salmon-bearing streams that need to be buffered. This we put in the address for the Department of Agriculture in Salem, because we're close to a stream, Mill Creek, and it actually has to be buffered. So, and very briefly, some threatened species that have been in our radar recently because of some deaths are the street hornblende and some golden eaglets. There have been some problems in the last few months. There have been deaths of these birds due to pesticide poisonings. At least one of them was from zinc phosphide. So you're gonna have to be careful. When I told you about the 2,000 endangered species, once again, EPA now has another new website, and for some unknown reason, they call this one Bulletin Slide 2. We all cringed when we heard it because we thought, this is not going to work. But it actually does. This one is specifically for endangered species. This is the website here. And I'm telling you this because this is what it looks like. What you will find on pesticide labels, and I didn't get a chance to photocopy one and put on here, but under environmental hazards or endangered species on newer pesticide labels, there may be a section that says, go to this website to see if you have any bulletins. And it's a requirement of, this becomes part of the label, which means it's part of the law. And if there's a bulletin in your area, it becomes enforceable. So how this works is, you give it the product, the application, and you hit enter, and it will ping up the area if there's a bulletin. Currently, there are, I think, 10 states that have active bulletins, and this will only grow over time. It actually works pretty nifty. And I go through it more, but I don't have time. So, the last thing I want to tell you is that we do have reciprocal licensing for anybody who's not anybody, but most people who have a license out of the state of Idaho could potentially get a reciprocal license with Oregon. And we just began this, and it may happen out of Washington too within the next year or so, but in case there's anybody in here who knows people in Idaho, this was kind of a big thing. So, questions? Yes.
Yeah, actually, that'd be a big thing for Washington.
Oh, yes.
We get these questions all the time.
Yes.
We don't get reciprocal if we sign up for Washington. If we get Washington credits, we don't get those
Credits?
reciprocated.
Credits are separate. This is actually licenses.
Yeah, so it doesn't affect the credit system.
Separate. Any questions about the buffer zones? Pollinator? Is your head going to explode? I'm sorry. Thank you.
We've got more confidence in our government than ever now.